The following video was sponsored by the Greek American Heritage Society of Philadelphia, preserving and promoting our community's history.
Our guest today has been a witness to Greek and Greek American issues around the world for the last 20 years. He's also our hometown boy from Philadelphia. He is the executive director of the AHEPA in Washington, D.C., Basil Mossaidis. Basil, welcome to Cosmos Philly.
Thank you, Teddy. I want to thank all of you at Cosmos Philly and the Greek American Heritage Society here in Philadelphia for doing such fine work. I think it's something that's long overdue, and I think it's a great way to preserve our history here in Philadelphia.
Wonderful. Thank you, Basil. Let's talk about that a little bit. First, 20 years is a long time, and you've actually been with the AHEPA for more than 30 years.
Yeah.
So you've bared witness to a lot of issues and changes in the Greek and Greek American community around the world. Let's talk about a few of them. What are some of the big ones?
Well, that's very interesting. You don't really look at yourself when you're working as you're a witness to history, right? But when you look backwards, it's very simple to see that things changed. When I started back in 1990 at the AHEPA as just an office staff member, I had no idea that I was embarking on such a wonderful visual history. I didn't know I would participate in seeing how our community went through changes. I remember in 1991 in Washington, D.C., then President of AHEPA, James Schofield, called for a unity forum, which brought all the heads of all the diaspora organizations together. There was 35 people in a room, and I was sitting in a chair against the wall taking notes. And at that meeting, the Supreme President was with Andy Athens from UHAC, the United Hellenic American Congress, who had a tremendous amount of energy. Andy was sort of a dynamo machine. Everybody knew who he was, spent a lot of money to get his message across on the Hill. And all of these people, Philip Christopher with the PSECA organization was there, and all the other diaspora groups, the Pan-Macedonians, the Pan-Pondians, they all had a representative at this thing. And it was discussed that, we as a community need to work together to get our message across, mainly to Congress, right? But as Greek Americans, fragmentation is sort of our middle name, right? So the cohesion of those types of groups sort of falls to the wayside when individual personalities get involved. So unfortunately, the concept was great, but there was no follow-through. So everybody was doing their own thing in the diaspora. I think when that started, all these issues were really Greek-oriented. And if we can just limit our discussion on this particular topic to the United States, the Greek Americans in this country don't really have needs like, let's say, the Spanish-speaking immigrants from Mexico and Central America. They have issues, right? They need citizenship, they need papers to work, but our Greek Americans don't have those issues. Our Greek Americans are educated individuals. Our parents that came in the 50s and the 60s came here for opportunity. Not only for themselves, but for us, the children. If you look at generationally in the United States, the amount of Greek American immigrant children, the first generation of these children in the United States, a very large percentage, I don't have the facts, are college graduates or professionals in some kind of industry. They're movers and shakers. That is different than these other immigrants that want the same dream, this American dream. And if you go to Canada and you see what they've done, socially, they are a little bit more stunted when it comes to this thing I'm talking about, the generational thing. They're one generation behind us here. They're still Greek. They speak Greek. They participate at Greek-speaking meetings, which is a rarity here in the United States. And you can see that by going to any Greek church. Mm-hmm. Most of them are 50, 60, 70% English speaking rather than Greek, which is fine. I'm not passing judgment on that, but it shows the cultural differences and the withering away of what it means to be Greek and how we're becoming Hellenes. Mm-hmm. I mean, our children, your children, my children, they don't really speak that much Greek. It's a novelty for them, right? We had to go to Greek school, right? Our parents had to speak to us in Greek, so we had to learn. So if we don't instill a sense of pride in our children, and I don't mean baklava and feta cheese, I'm talking about the struggles that our people went through, not only in 1821, but 3,000 years ago. How did they do what they did in Athens? How did Alexander conquer the known world? How did these philosophers and mathematicians and all these people create this Greek thing? Any academic will tell you the significance of Greek history. So it's a big question. I mean,
and you've just, with all that, you've just given us a brushstroke of it.
Our ethnicity makes us who we are. We want to work. We want to be successful. We want to move forward. But a lot of times what happens is we get stuck in the quagmire of everyday life, and it stunts that for us.
You know, we've also got to say that being Greek can be complex. You yourself, which is what I want to touch on next, you're a Greek American of Pondian descent.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of a complicated trail to follow up on. You know, you're a first generation Greek American. Let's talk about it a little bit, because you're from Philadelphia. You grew up in a very ethnic community at the time,
right.
Very immigrant community. You were part of that 50s to 90s era where the Greeks were moving west into the suburbs right outside of West Philadelphia, Upper Darby Township, where a Greek enclave took over, shops, a few,
right.
church, brand new,
right.
couple of clubhouses there,
right.
a Boy Scout troop,
right.
a Goya. You were part of, that really high point of it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So I think our parents were very provincial in their thinking, right? We had a village concept when our parents were here. And I think that worked very well for an entire generation of people. They transplanted themselves from wherever in Greece to, let's use Philadelphia, where it had already a Greek presence. Downtown there was a lot of Greeks, the old city. But this wave of new immigrants that lived in West Philadelphia, my father, when he came in 1955, lived at 52nd and Osage in West Philly. And the building was owned by non-Greeks, and there was 2 apartments, and there was another Greeks that rented there. And that's where they first came. So my father went to West Philadelphia High to get his TOEFL or whatever it is, the language certificate. So Philadelphia was a great enclave, like so many others in history, right? Greeks usually did that. One guy went somewhere, he brought the whole choreo with him. So we have a lot of different Greek ethnic tribes, if you will, here in Philadelphia. Pontians, we had the Macedonians, we had the Epiroti, we had the different islands.
They're all well-known groups.
And it worked very well in that time period. I think it's a calendar kind of thing. There were no phones, there was no computers.
Lived next to each other.
So the center of our community was either the shopping district or the church, right? You and I went to the same church, St. Demetrius, which was, I guess, the most ethnic church, right?
It was huge.
A lot of
500
Greeks.
families
Yeah.
at the time.
My dad, your dad, my uncle, all the people that were the immigrants that wanted to bring about a change worked together to build that church, right? Jim Tanis was a big
Huge name.
for us in our community, and so many others. Bill Williams, all these people did so much because it's their church, right? It was built in 1963 or 65, I don't remember when. And of course, the architect of the church was an AHEPA, and he
Get that in.
gotta plug that. And Bill Chigotis from New Jersey, past president. But I digress from the main sociological thing, and I'm not a sociologist, but it's great to see our community was in a bubble. Right? Everything that happened in our community was controlled by our community, right? The language, the cooking, the dancing, the Boy Scouts, the festival, the whatever revolved around the church. we went to work or to school during the week, and then we lived our lives in the church. I mean, we spent countless hours playing basketball or learning how to dance Greek or going and folding the crosses for Easter time.
I remember wearing the Boy Scout neckerchief had the symbol of the church on it.
Yeah, it did.
A Boy Scout troop with the name of the church, the big blue Boy Scout bus with the cross on it.
Yeah.
I mean, these are.
That's how it was. I mean, America was tolerant of anything that would make the people more American, right? It's okay to have a Boy Scout troop connected to your church. A lot of them do. The Catholic Church, the Episcopalian, they all have it. But in this political climate, things are different, right? Everything's a problem. But when we were growing up, the problem was how much you were going to eat. How much food did my mom make for dinner? It wasn't like a real problem. We lived on Barrington Road in Upper Darby, 216 Barrington Road, and everybody on that road was Greek, right? Thea Maria, Thea Georgia, Thea Philhellenes, everybody was there, right? Not that they were related to me, but that's what we called them, right? That was a show of respect. And we were going in and out of the houses like they were ours.
I think what's easy to say about that community is that you felt like you were in a Greek village, like you said. You really felt that way. I remember Easter, you could walk down the street in these little row homes, people were cooking the lambs on their lawns. Yeah. You saw the language. I've heard people often say, I would come to Upper Darby, I'd walk down the street, and I could hear Greek coming out of the house.
Well, you hear different language now. You hear
that was that. I'm saying
Oriental, Chinese, whatever the hell you hear. But
languages being spoken in Upper Darby, but there was that brief moment in time, 40 years, that this community, emerged. Yeah. The question then becomes, looking back on it, knowing that there's a great piece of history that you got to live through, how did that, and it's a little deep, how did that shape or influence who you are today?
Very much. Being Greek to me is more than just being able to speak it. It's the blood that runs through my veins. And I'll take that one step further because Greeks are very territorial, right? We're not only Greek, but like you said, I'm a Pandian, right? So you ask an Epiroti, hey, I'm a Greek, but I'm an Epiroti. Like there's a difference, right? There is to us. But to the outside world, to the Americani, you're Greek, right? So we're very much that way. So Pandian upbringing, you focus on the terrible massacres that people go through. That's all you hear about, right? As a child, you hear
so much more to the culture,
right? So that's embedded in you. So you appreciate everything that everybody did before you. Your relatives, your grandfathers, your great grandfathers. I remember my grandfather died in 1966, October. I was 2.5 years old, and I remember when he died because it was an event, right? I remember him telling me a story in Greek, of course, that in order for him to escape Turkey in 1922, he had to hide under a pile of dead bodies. So when they checked him out, they all said, "Oh, it's there." And then he crawled out and escaped. So you don't hear that kind of stuff, right? That's not normal, right? What do you hear now? Oh, I couldn't find a parking space, right?
That's the biggest complaint,
right? So we're culturally different. We're sensitive to what our forefathers did, right? And it's important. And anybody who doesn't appreciate and contemplate their history really has no future, at least for me.
Just out of curiosity, your Pontian roots, do you know exactly what part of Pontus your family comes from? Could you just mention that?
So on one side they came from Trapezunda, and the other side was from Samsunda, which they're close enough together, but they're not like right on top of each other. And my grandfather from my father's side was my grandmother's father, right? So that would be my great-grandfather, right? My grandmother's father was the tax collector for Keresunda for the Turks, right? And that was his job. So they hated him, right? But they loved him, but that was his job. I mean, a lot of these people had these kinds of jobs, right? They weren't boat builders or whatever. They functioned under that Ottoman Empire because that's what it was prior to 1921 or something. So it's important for us to remember that, right? We remember that. You have the same stories.
Oh yeah.
I've traced them. I've gone back. I've visited these places. Really maybe we'll do it together.
I'd love to.
So let's talk a little bit about your faith. It's played a critical role in your life all the way from your childhood. You are an archon. It's a very respectable achievement. Tell us exactly what that is for our audience that doesn't know what that is, and then talk about your faith.
So the archons are an award, a designation that's given through the church in the United States. Somebody nominates you or somebody asks for that elevation, if you will. And the patriarch, the ecumenical patriarch in Constantinople, receives applications or whatever, and he selects individuals that are sort of the knights, if you will, of the patriarchate. These individuals, and there's roughly 800 of them in the United States in all the church communities, view themselves as soldiers for the security and the safety of our ecumenical patriarchate and our Orthodox faith around the world when applicable. We're called upon to educate individuals, decision makers, express our displeasure with any violation of human rights or any kind of Christian persecution. It's a wonderful organization that it's an sort of an arm of the church, but it's not really, controlled by the church. These are, again, like I said, we view ourselves as soldiers, ready to help fight to save the Christian principles of our Orthodox faith.
A regular churchgoer?
Yeah.
Where do you attend down there in Washington?
I'm blessed to be able to be member of two churches. I never gave up my membership at my home church at St. Demetrius because I love my community and I love my church. I don't have the ability to disconnect from it. And we're also members of St. Sophia in Washington, D.C.
Let's talk a little bit about your Washington position as executive director. What's the day-to-day activity of an executive director?
So the organization, the AHEPA, is a large international organization now. It's global in scope. It started out as an organization in the United States to help the immigrant from Greece to become an American. We would have citizenship classes, we would have language classes across the country. And as the immigrant of the United States was going further and further out west, the AHEPA sort of traveled along with them. Of course, every organization goes through growing spurts. Our focus changed in the 40s when World War II began. The AHEPA was a big money-generating revenue income for the U.S. government. We sold over or close to $300 million worth of war bonds. That was roughly 10% of the total cost of the Second World War.
Wow.
That was done by going around and collecting nickels and dimes through the chapters, through the members that understood what a wonderful and beautiful country we had and how unjust fascism was in Europe. And when you read the history of what the AHEPA did in World War II, it's fascinating. The U.S. government designated the Order of AHEPA as one of the only organizations as an official agent of the U.S. Treasury. And in my office I have a certificate from Henry Morgenthau, who was the Secretary of Treasury back then. And we built airplanes, and they put, the Order of AHEPA was on one of the airplanes. And it's a magnificent history, right?
Yeah, the question is, I can hear it in your voice. Yeah. There's a love of AHEPA. What does it mean to you? Let's put it that simple.
So, AHEPA is a very personal thing for me, and of course, you as one of my childhood friends and all my childhood friends, they make fun of me because of my devotion and brainwashed AHEPA guy. But the organization itself it's far more important than the individual, right? It's collective. What does that organization do for everybody? When you look at it one by one, big deal. But when you look at it as one big thing, it's huge.
The body.
Right? It's gigantic. It's 400 chapters of 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 men that work in their community to help their community, right? We've built old age homes, 92 of them across the United States. We've donated from 1922 till now, if you use today's money, over $1 billion to things, to hospitals. We built a hospital in Thessaloniki. We built a tower in the one in Athens. We built medical centers here. We fund doctors, research, first aid, hurricane relief. I mean, we're our own worst enemy. We don't advertise what we do, right? We don't go on television and say, donate to the Red Cross or donate to the AHEPA. We don't do that, and I think that's our biggest weakness. But our biggest strength is our membership, right? They're everywhere. There's 5 chapters within 10 miles of where I'm sitting right here in Philadelphia. And they do such good work. And they don't really send information to anybody. Oh, we fed 1,000 homeless people. Upper Darby goes and feeds them every week.
Right. Yep.
Nobody knows that, right?
Yep.
I mean, the chapter here in Philadelphia,
Yep.
the Dr. Zaoutis in Greece, who's like the Dr. Fauci, if you will, advising the Prime Minister, he's a member of that chapter, and we send him money, like 30 grand for the investigation. So we do a lot of things, but on a collective basis, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we educate children on what it is to be Hellenes. We send them to Greece. We give them college educational. I mean, if your kid wants to go to Greece and go to our program, he gets six credits. He goes twice, he gets 12 credits. That's a semester for nothing, right? For free. So we do so much and we try so hard, but you know, it's difficult. It's more than a passion for me. It's part of who I am. I'll never forget one time I was going to Harrisburg for a meeting and my car broke down because the indicator on the you know, when you go to park reverse drive and this says 1 2 3. So the indicator was broken. So I put it into drive thinking it was in drive, but it was on 1 or 2, something like that. And I drove back from it, and my engine block cracked, and everything leaked out. Thank God we were on Sproul Road, and it was 12:30 at night, and it was freezing. And I called my dad, and I said, "Dad, something's wrong with the car." He's like, "What's wrong with it? It doesn't work. Can you come get us?" And Timmy was with us, and George Kalutis, you remember George, and myself, and somebody else. And the car broke down. My dad came in 20 minutes, and he was screaming at me, cursing at me. "You and your damn AHEPA, this AHEPA, AHEPA, AHEPA." So I'll never forget that because when I became the executive director, it was stuck in my dad's head. He came to me and said, "You know, I'm really proud and I'm sorry that I gave you such a hard time." Right? Because we're all members, but we don't, I mean, you're a member. I mean, you go to a meeting once a year, maybe, right? But for me, it's like sort of an everyday thing, right? And whatever your problem is with AHEPA, like, I have too many things to do and I can't go, or I'm busy, or my kid. So multiply that by 26,000 people. That's what I do.
That's what you do.
I take care of those
You
people.
took the long way to give us the answer.
Sorry.
Basically.
You'll edit it out. It doesn't matter. We do a lot. I coordinate all that. And it's really a pleasure and an honor to be able to sit here and tell you that it's a love of mine. It's like don't tell my wife, but that's my second wife, AHEPA.
Second wife.
Yeah, I mean, it's really something for me.
Now we got the full answer.
Yeah, don't.
AHEPA is my second wife. Jan?
Yeah, I'm in trouble now.
You're a fan of history,
Yeah.
which I am also.
Yeah.
Who are the historic people or events that have really inspired you?
So, going to school in the United States for history, of course, I have American references to that question, right? So I'm going to give you 2 people. One's Greek, one's American. The American one is very easy to me. I think the person historically who influenced me as an American and continues to do that today is Theodore Roosevelt. And that's a strange kind of, well, why you pick him? Why don't you say Jesus, right? But when you read the history of Theodore Roosevelt, it's a fascinating story of a man that was ill as a child. He had asthma. I mean, he was just, everything was against him. Most children would just become invisible when they were ill. And we're talking about the late 1800s. He, despite his ailments, and you know, he was just a scrawny little kid. I mean, he worked, and he took every challenge and bit bit down on something and faced it and dealt with it and beat it every time. He was a boxer. He became a runner. He became a colonel in the volunteer army to go to San Juan in Puerto Rico to fight during the Spanish-American War. He funded the whole damn thing. Okay, he was rich, but he bought the horses, the uniforms. He bought everything. because he believed in America and he believed in what good we could do. And what happened to him? He was such a threat to the political establishment that they gave him eventually the post of vice president to shut him up in 1900. And he got elected in 1900. They were installed in March 1901. The president gets assassinated that summer. And he becomes president. Oh boy, did things change for America then, right? That was the time period when America became a superpower, in my opinion, because England was on the decline. The First World War sort of killed them, but the United States was building naval ships. They had naval presence. They created the talk softly but carry a big stick policy. He was a corporate buster. He didn't like monopolies, so he was always working for the people. And he was one of my heroes, I think. And he's somebody that I look to for inspiration sometimes, because he has some great, pieces of literature that he wrote. But now the Greek people, there's so many to pick from, but I'll default to my dad, right? I find that if you told me, okay, pack up and leave and go to Zimbabwe because the opportunity is there for you, I'm not going to do that, right? But here's a kid, 17 years old, who was an immigrant himself in Greece because he came from Romania after the Second World War. That's where the Pandians from Pondos, they had an enclave in Constanza, Romania. So after the war, the borders were going to be shut down and they came here. So he's an immigrant twice over, my dad. And I make fun of my dad sometimes, but I don't do it because I'm making fun of him to make him feel bad. It's the way I remember the things that he told me and taught us, right? I mean, I think that, a father's job is to impart power and information to their children to make them better than themselves, right? That's what I want to do with my kid. That's what my dad did with me and my brother. So he's probably one of those people from my history that I look to for, advice and encouragement.
Well, we said earlier in our conversation that you are a witness to the history and culture of Hellenism. Mm-hmm. Where is the diaspora community here in America? What's the future hold for us?
So, in my position as the executive director, I've had to deal with several different presidents, right? So each one of them makes their mark on the organization and thus the community. I feel that our community is always changing, and it's a challenge for us as an organization and as individuals to keep up with the change. And I don't know that we need to react to things to create change. I think we need to have forward thinking to see where we're going. So the future for organizations like ours, or even because our diaspora is part of it, has to be connected to this technological expansion, right? Are we going to be able to use technology to teach our children and the general public what it means to be a Hellene, what it means to be part of this diaspora? Our children may not have the same opportunity that we did, only because of societal changes. I feel that we need to educate our children as much as we can, more than we're educated, right? My father had a high school diploma. We strive to have master's degrees. Maybe our children can have PhDs. This is something that our ethnicity promotes, education. I mean, it's a measurement of who you are, right? Oh, Dr. So-and-so versus Joe Papadopoulos, right? I mean, there is a significance in those titles. So a lot of people became lawyers, a lot of people became, certified whatever in their field, and all those accomplishments are great. But the more I don't like using this word, but the more we dilute our ethnicity.
And that becomes generational too.
Right. And the more we don't educate our children on what it means to be part of this diaspora, the eventuality will be that it will dissipate, right? I mean, it's just a watering down thing. So can we maintain our ethnic identity? We have 1.2 million Greek Americans supposedly in the United States. are there going to be people that identify themselves as Greek Americans in the next generation? And I don't mean having a Greek name. I mean what you and I share. The language, the culture, the euphemisms, the connection to Greece and where Greeks are. Like, one of my dreams would be to go to Alexandria with the lady who's trying to find Alexander the Great's tomb there, right? That would be a fascinating excursion for me, because I want to be connected to that, because that's part of my legacy, part of my history. I don't think my son would want to go with me there, right? So that's my problem. And I think as a parent and as a member of this community, it's incumbent on us to try and instill something in the next generation to maintain their connection to that.
It sounds like something that's on your bucket list for the future, which brings us to our final question. Where is Basil Mossaidis going to be in 10 years? And are there challenges or achievements that you're still looking at going, I'd like to be here and I'd like to do this?
I'd like to do a lot of things, really. I've always viewed myself as a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old, 20-year-old. I've always felt that I was younger than I was. But age has a very, very, sneaky way of catching up, right? So I'm unable to do things that I could have done 30 years ago, only because of stamina or...
Like what? Give us an example. What, climb a mountain?
Yeah, like when you're young, you're like, I want to go climb Mount, so-and-so. Now, when I think about it, I'm like, maybe they can just drop me off at the top with a helicopter and I can walk down, right? So it's sort of like that, right? I still have the passion to do things that you'd say, what? You want to jump out of an airplane? But I still would think about doing that, because I don't really need to do anything but fall.
What's on the bucket list then? What's on this list?
Well, I have a lot of, like I said a little earlier, I have this deep desire to go on an archaeological dig. To actually bend down and dig up the dirt from the time period that these ancient, Alexander or Socrates or Plato or Ptolemy, whoever, lived, and see and touch and feel a piece of that history. That to me is exciting. And another thing would be, I'd love to go with my dad to Pontos, where I want to go to Panagia Soumela with my dad. I want him to feel a connection to that. Like, we went to the one in Thessaloniki, and it was very moving, but it's not the real thing, right? We want to go to the real thing. I want to see where my grandfathers lived, where my grandmother was born, right? And it's very funny, because we went to where my father was born in Romania, and that was on his bucket list, and we did that for him, and it was kind of anticlimactic, right? Because we heard the stories of my house and where I lived and the expansive, it was a row home. I mean, it was like, my son was like, that's it? So.
How did that make you feel, taking that trip with your father?
It was great. It was my son and my father and I, right? The three of us went on a 10-day cruise, and the first stop was to his town in Romania on the cruise of the Black Sea. And it was great to be with him and my son at the same time, because my son doesn't really see him that often. And we were 10 days on the boat together, and my son, Kyriako, was the youngest on the boat. So, I mean, what does a 10-year-old do on a boat full of old people? Right? So we had to learn to play tavli together. My father had to teach my son how to play tavli or poker or stuff that he taught me, right? Which is something very important in our ethnicity, this connection to the old people. You, like we had our grandparents living with us.
Right, yeah.
It was part of what we were. They died in our homes. That's okay. That's nature.
Yeah.
Now we just pay to hide the people in a closet somewhere, in an old age home somewhere, and then
Unfortunately, yeah.
So for me, part of my bucket list would be that. I'd love to go to Russia. I'd love to go see St. Petersburg. And all these places I'm talking about, we're going to start AHEPA chapters, so,
Well, we can close, I guess, with that. If you have a final thought.
No, I want to finish by thanking you again. I think this is a Herculean task that you're undertaking, and I'm very proud that you thought of contacting me, because usually when you deal with childhood friends, it's really not a serious thing, right? more of a having fun kind of thing. So I want to thank you and the Hellenic Society for doing this. I think it's a wonderful example of your talent and the vision of this organization.
Well, thank you again, Basil, and we wish you the best of luck. And remember, we're your family here in Philadelphia, and good luck with the AHEPA, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
For more information about sponsoring or viewing the interview series, visit the Greek American Heritage Society of Philadelphia online at gahsp.org.